Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into a topic today that may seem pretty simple on the surface, but as we get into it, I think you'll see that it really opens up a much bigger conversation.
Absolutely.
About global marriage laws and cultural norms and women's rights and so much more. And the topic is women's right to remarry.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at some data today from the World Bank's gender data portal, which is really cool.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, so kind of peeling back the layers of tradition and history and seeing how these laws impact real lives.
It is, yeah. And it's a great way, I think, to sort of look at how societies around the world view marriage gender roles.
Exactly.
And even the concept of choice itself.
Exactly.
Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
What's fascinating about this topic is that it goes so far beyond just saying, I do again.
Right.
It's deeply connected to history, law, cultural norms, and even economics.
So it's not just a modern concept, though?
Not at all.
Okay.
Marriage laws have deep historical roots.
Yeah.
And they're often intertwined with ideas about property, family lines, and a woman's place in society. Historically, this put women at a disadvantage, limiting their control over marriage, and even more so, remarriage.
So how did things start to change?
Well, the 20th and 21st centuries saw a major push for women's rights globally. Think about landmark agreements like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women.
Right.
These really put pressure on governments to re-examine discriminatory laws, including those around remarriage.
But looking at the World Bank data, it's clear that we're not looking at a mission-accomplished situation worldwide.
Yeah.
This map is a real eye-opener.
It really is.
It uses color coding to show where women have the same legal right to remarry as men, that's orange, versus where they don't, that's blue, and then gray indicates where data isn't available.
Interesting.
What's the first thing that jumps out at you when you see this visual?
Well, I think what's striking is the stark regional divide.
Yeah.
Much of the Americas, Europe, and Eastern Asia are largely orange, indicating legal parity between men and women when it comes to remarrying.
Okay.
But then you see these large swaths of blue, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa, parts of North Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. This really highlights the work that still needs to be done.
And it makes you wonder, what are the underlying factors that create such different realities for women around the world? But before we unpack that, I have to ask about something that really surprised me in the article.
Okay.
It mentioned that some countries historically imposed mandatory waiting periods for women after divorce or widowhood before they could remarry.
Oh, wow.
Some of these waiting periods could be as long as 300 days. Why would that be?
Those waiting periods were often rooted in very practical concerns.
Okay.
Imagine a world without modern paternity tests.
Right.
These waiting periods, which primarily impacted women, helped ensure any children born after a divorce or widowhood could be clearly linked to the previous husband.
Oh, okay.
It boils down to safeguarding lineage and inheritance rights.
That makes sense.
Of course, that approach is extremely outdated, but it demonstrates how deeply intertwined marriage laws are with these social systems.
Let's delve deeper into some of these regional differences. The article breaks it down further, and it's fascinating to see how unique each region's situation is.
Yeah.
Let's start with those areas that are mostly orange on the map. High-income Western and OECD countries.
Okay.
Could you explain what OECD countries are for those who might not be familiar with the term?
Certainly. The OECD stands for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
Okay.
It's a group of mostly high-income developed countries that collaborate on economic and social issues.
Got it.
So we're talking about nations like the United States, Canada, Australia, and much of Europe.
Okay.
These countries have, for the most part, reformed their marriage laws decades ago to align with their commitment to gender equality.
Okay.
So there aren't usually formal legal barriers preventing women from remarrying.
Then we have Sub-Saharan Africa, where, as we saw on the map, blue dominates. What are some of the key reasons behind this?
It's a complex mix of factors, often rooted in patriarchal customary laws and inheritance practices that place restrictions on a woman's right to remarry.
Right.
In some countries, widows might be subjected to waiting periods, while others have conditions on property rights that make remarriage less financially viable or even risky for women.
So tradition plays a significant role here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's important to understand that many African nations have hybrid legal systems where civil codes exist alongside religious or customary laws. These systems don't always agree, which can create incredibly complex legal situations for women.
Next, we have the Middle East and North Africa. Looking at the map, it seems like a mix of orange and blue. What are some of the unique elements shaping the landscape of remarriage rights in this region?
One key factor in this region is the influence of personal status laws.
Okay.
These laws often stem from religious interpretations and can result in different rules for men and women when it comes to marriage, divorce, and remarriage.
So for listeners who aren't familiar with the term, what exactly are personal status laws?
They cover areas of family law, governing issues like marriage, divorce, child custody, and inheritance. These laws are often deeply rooted in religious doctrines and traditions. In some countries in the Middle East and North Africa, these laws may require women to obtain permission from male relatives or even their former husbands before they can remarry.
That sounds very restrictive.
It can be, and while there have been some efforts toward reform in recent years, achieving full legal parity in remarriage rights remains an ongoing process in this part of the world.
Now, Asia presents an intriguing scenario with a real mix on the map. Some East and Southeast Asian nations have clear legal equality, while others impose additional requirements on women or have strong social norms that create barriers to remarriage.
You see a wide range of situations in Asia. Everything from outdated guidelines based on paternal lineage to deeply embedded social norms influencing legal codes. While legal changes are happening, the pace varies dramatically from one country to the next.
It's like a patchwork quilt of progress.
Exactly. It underscores how important it is to consider the specific historical and cultural context of each nation when we discuss something like a woman's right to remarry.
This map has certainly highlighted the global variations, but legal rights are only one piece of the puzzle, aren't they?
Right.
We need to understand how these laws impact people's lives on the ground.
Yeah.
Let's take a closer look at how these laws affect women, men, and others in a variety of ways.
Okay. When we examine this from a woman's perspective, the right to remarry is about much more than just changing marital status. It connects deeply with individual freedom and empowerment.
It's about having the right to choose.
Yes, to have control over your own life and future. And for many women around the world, that choice is directly tied to their economic security, inheritance rights, and even their social standing.
Especially for women who find themselves widowed or divorced, remarriage can provide a crucial safety net.
Think about it in the context of many cultures where a woman's social and economic security is traditionally linked to her husband. If that support is lost through death or divorce, remarriage can offer a path to regaining stability, especially if she has children to care for.
And let's not forget about women escaping abusive relationships.
You're absolutely right. The right to remarry can be a lifeline for these women, offering a chance to start fresh and build a safer life.
So it's not just about a change in relationship status. It's about basic survival and the power to determine one's own path. What about from a man's perspective? They might not face the same legal hurdles to remarrying. But societal expectations can still play a significant role.
That's an important point. While we often focus on the pressures women face, men aren't entirely free from cultural norms either. In many societies, there's a strong expectation for men to be providers and heads of households. Remarriage, especially if children are involved, can be seen as a way to fulfill those traditional roles.
It's almost as if there's this unspoken pressure on men to remarry quickly after a divorce or becoming a widower. Like society is saying, you need a wife to be complete.
It's a reminder that gender roles and expectations impact everyone, even if they manifest in different ways.
Now, the article brings up a critical point that I want to make sure we address. the experiences of non-binary and transgender individuals. This is where things get particularly complex.
You're hitting on a crucial issue. Most legal systems around the world are still built on a binary understanding of gender, male or female. This leaves non-binary and transgender people facing significant challenges when it comes to marriage and remarriage.
Yeah.
The laws often simply don't recognize their identities,
Wow.
leading to potential legal barriers, social stigma, or even contradictions in how their gender is legally recognized.
It underscores the need for legal systems to evolve and become more inclusive, moving beyond traditional gender binaries.
Absolutely. True equality means ensuring everyone has the same rights and freedoms regardless of their gender identity. Now let's shift gears and delve into some of the intriguing details and insights that the article highlights.
Okay, I'm ready for some mind-blowing facts.
We've already discussed those waiting periods imposed on women in some countries before they could remarry, sometimes lasting for hundreds of days. But did you know that in certain legal systems, widows could actually lose their inheritance rights if they remarried too soon?
Seriously, that seems incredibly unfair.
It is. It essentially punishes women for choosing to remarry, further restricting their options and autonomy.
Yeah.
It's a stark example of how marriage laws are often intertwined with economic power.
It's like these laws are designed to keep women financially dependent.
In many cases, you're uncovering the historical legacy we're still grappling with. The article also points out another fascinating wrinkle, the disconnect that sometimes exists between a country's civil laws, which might guarantee equal rights, and the decisions made in religious or customary courts, which often operate under their own set of rules.
So even if a country's official laws say women have equal rights, those rights might not be upheld in practice.
Exactly. A woman might have the legal right to remarry according to the country's constitution,
Right.
but then face significant obstacles when her case is handled within a religious or customary framework. It adds another layer of complexity to an already complicated issue.
It must be incredibly frustrating to be caught in that kind of legal limbo. It highlights the importance of not just changing laws, but making sure those changes are actually implemented and enforced across the board. We've covered a lot of ground here, from historical context and regional variations to different gender perspectives. But I think it's time to step back and look at the bigger picture. Why are these patterns so persistent in some parts of the world? What's the why behind all of this data?
That's the key question. To answer it, we have to examine the root causes of these inequalities. Cultural traditions and patriarchal norms definitely play a major role. Many societies hold deep-seated beliefs about family structure, women's roles, and male dominance. These beliefs often manifest in laws and practices that limit women's autonomy, including their right to remarry.
So even if you change the laws, if the underlying cultural norms remain the same, progress is going to be much slower.
Precisely. And we can't overlook the role of religion in shaping marriage laws globally.
I know this can be a sensitive topic.
It is. But it's crucial to acknowledge that interpretations of religious doctrines can influence legal conditions placed on women's remarriage, often tied to concerns about lineage or modesty. It's important to approach this with nuance and recognize that interpretations and practices can vary widely within any given religion.
The article also brought up a link between a country's economic and political landscape and its stance on women's rights.
There's a definite correlation. Countries with a greater number of women in government and legal systems tend to have more gender-equal laws, including those related to remarriage.
It makes sense that when women have a seat at the table where decisions are being made, their voices and perspectives are more likely to be reflected in the laws.
Exactly. And finally, we can't forget about the intersectional challenges that many women face.
You mean how factors like class, ethnicity, and geographic location can create additional layers of difficulty?
Yes. For example, women in rural areas might be more affected by customary laws than women living in urban areas who might have better access to civil courts or legal aid.
Yeah.
It's not just about being a woman, it's about recognizing how all these different aspects of a person's identity can create unique barriers.
So it's about addressing all forms of inequality, not just focusing on one issue in isolation.
You've hit the nail on the head. True progress requires a holistic approach.
We've been on quite a journey today, exploring the complexities of women's right to remarry around the world.
It has been fascinating to uncover how something so personal as marriage is intertwined with history, law, culture, and even economics.
We started with that visual representation from the World Bank, which really highlighted the global disparities in remarriage rights. Some countries have achieved legal equality, while others still have a long way to go.
It's true.
And we dug deeper into those regional variations,
Yeah.
exploring the nuances of Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and North Africa, and Asia.
It's so interesting.
We saw how traditions, religious interpretations, and legal systems all contribute to these unique landscapes.
Right.
We even considered how these laws affect different groups: women, men, and those who don't identify with the traditional gender binary.
It's a lot to unpack.
It's clear that this issue has significant implications for individuals and for society as a whole.
For sure.
So what are some key takeaways you hope our listener will glean from this deep dive?
Well, first and foremost, I want them to understand that the right to remarry is a fundamental human right.
Okay.
It's intrinsically linked to a woman's autonomy and her ability to live a life free from discrimination.
It's about having the power to choose, isn't it? To choose whether to marry, whom to marry, and whether to remarry if circumstances change.
Precisely. Second, I hope our listener appreciates the complexity of this issue. There's no one-size-fits-all solution,
Right.
as the context varies greatly from country to country.
It's about taking a nuanced approach, considering the historical, cultural, and religious factors that shape each region's unique situation.
Exactly. And finally, it's crucial to recognize that legal reforms alone aren't enough. True change requires addressing the deeply embedded social norms and power structures that perpetuate gender inequality.
So it's not just about changing laws on paper.
No.
It's about shifting mindsets and challenging those ingrained beliefs that limit women's choices and opportunities.
You got it. It requires ongoing education, advocacy, and a collective commitment to creating a more equitable world.
As we conclude this deep dive, I keep thinking about something. We focused on women's right to remarry, but it raises a broader question. What about the institution of marriage itself?
Oh, interesting.
If we're truly striving for equality, shouldn't we also be examining how marriage might need to evolve to reflect a more inclusive and equitable society?
That's an insightful observation. As societies and our understandings of gender and relationships continue to evolve, it's only natural that our legal and social frameworks adapt as well.
It reminds me of that saying, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Every step we take, every conversation we have brings us closer to that vision of a world where everyone has the freedom to love, live, and choose their own path.
Well said. It's been a pleasure diving deep with you today.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listener, we encourage you to continue exploring this important topic. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.